Welcome back to episode 6 now, if I'm right. Doesn't seem like 6 nights of doing this, to be very honest. And last night was pretty good. I'm still getting a lot of comments from people, mostly looking to know where the grave's at, but as it's no real public access to it, I might just have to keep that one a secret for a little time longer. On this evening, which is the eve of Halloween, maybe it's fitting that we talk about Samhain, Halloween itself. Halloween, as we know it now, is, to me, a wee bit like St. Patrick's Day. It's been, I know the Americans out there might not like it, Americanized, but not 8 years ago there were celebrations at it, but not the type of celebrations we see today, and not the type of celebrations that we see around the world. But Ireland very much is the home of Halloween. And like very many other traditions and cultures here in Ireland, it's just another one that is spread around the world under a different name. Where did it come from originally? A lot of people would automatically think back and think it was the Celts. And automatically that would make it in and around the 2,000 to 2,500 years old. But others say it goes back much further. And I have to say I agree with them. It goes back to the time of the original Gaels, the original inhabitants of Ireland, the ancients who were there before the Great Pyramids were built. Ireland does have its place in history. The problem is, we didn't write anything down. And as I said before, we told our stories. And this practice is even alive to this very day. And just think of what I'm doing tonight, and what I've done all the other nights. I've told you a story. There are ancient monuments right across Ireland. Stone circles and stone alignments. And many of these hold alignments to the sun or the moon at solstice or equinox. And in a way these can be best summed up by George Barnett, the Sperrin Mountain man who excavated the Bigmore stone circles. But he's also a bit of a poet. I'm going to read out the last verse of his poem, The Bigmore Stone Circles. But it's one thing to say, and it isn't to mock. They set up their time by the very best clocks. It's all sorted out by the sun or the moon, and can't go astray till the last crack of doom. There's a certain simplicity in that. And in a way, it explains everything. But the more and more we study these tombs, and they've been very heavily studied down in Ireland's ancient East, but a little lesser known fact is that we have got tombs that align themselves to Samhain, to the sunrise in Samhain. And they're not just any tombs. They're the tombs that are part of the Boyne complex down in North. And the one that has its chamber lit up every Samhain is the one they call the Mount of Hostages. So straight away that sort of blows it out of the air that the Celts invented Samhain or Halloween. This ancient race of people didn't build these stone monuments for fun, and they didn't build them by accident. They built them on purpose. So now we begin to see the practice of celebrating at Halloween going back to maybe 3,500 or to 4,000 BC, making it almost a 6,000 year tradition here in Ireland. A tradition that influenced the Celts, the oncoming Christians, and to the modern day world. Tonight I'm going to tell a couple of more traditional stories, a new one and a couple of old ones. So we'll start off with a more light-hearted story, because last night was a wee bit heavy with the vampire. And this one is of a character called Stingy Jack, who has been exiled from both heaven and hell and has to walk the earth alone. But as the story goes, Jack was a miserable old drunk, a trickster. And one dark night he ran into the devil. But he didn't run into him in any forest or glen. He ran into him in the pub. We're in Ireland after all. Jack took the devil by offering his soul in exchange for one last drink. Now the devil quickly turned himself into a sixpence Jack lifted the sixpence as if he was going to pay the bartender, but quickly slipped it into his pocket, and in his pocket he also had a silver cross. Because of this, the devil couldn't change himself back, and Jack refused to let the devil go free until the devil had promised not to claim his soul for at least 10 years. The devil agreed, and 10 years later, Jack came across the devil again. Now this time he was out on a bit of a country road. The devil tried to take his soul again, but Jack, being the trickster that he was, said, "I'll go, but before you go, would you get me an apple out of that tree?" The devil, thinking he'd nothing to lose at this stage, he had him, went up the tree to get an apple. But as soon as he did, Jack placed crosses all around the trunk of the tree, and the devil was stuck. And this time, Jack made the devil promise that he'd never take his soul. And seeing no way out of this predicament, the devil agreed. When old stingy Jack eventually passed away several years later, he went to the gates of heaven. And he wasn't allowed in because he was a bit of a trickster, a deceitful man all his life. So Jack then went down to hell to see if the devil would take him in. But the devil kept his promise, and he wouldn't let him in. "But where can I go?" The devil simply said, "Back where you came from." But the way back was very dark, and stingy Jack pleaded with the devil to at least provide him with some light. So as a final gesture, he tossed Jack an ember, and Jack placed it into a hollowed out turnip, one of his favourite foods apparently. And from that day on, stingy Jack has roamed the earth with this turnip light to guide him. I do like that story. Originally here in Ireland, it was not pumpkins that we carved out. When I was a young fella, I didn't even get a turnip. We got big potatoes, and they were a nightmare, absolute nightmare to hollow out. But saying that, we did. And I actually think it was into my teens before I even carved a pumpkin. Maybe even into my teens before I even seen one. But as the festival sound has become more mainstream, and with America really picking up on it, the pumpkin became the lantern, and Stingy Jack became the pumpkin man. I think now we'll go for an older story. Now I gave Finn McCool a hard time, and that's only because he dressed up like a big baby when the giant Benadonna was looking to fight him. But the giant Finn has far more stories than the ones told up at the Giant's Causeway. And these stories are of great deeds. Finn comes from the Fenian cycle in Irish history. It's the third cycle of the old ways. First came the mythical and legends. Then came the Ulster men. Then the Fenian cycle. Then the cycle of the kings. Now there are a few different versions of the story, but the story is that old it's maybe changed tongues a couple of times. But of all the feats carried out by Finn, one feat carried out by Finn when he was only 10 was to kill Alan, the fire-breathing man with the Tudadan. Now at a first glance, Alan would remind you of the great Fomorian Balor, but instead of residing with the Tudadan in the other world, he resided out west, out across the ocean, in a place called Magmel. And at Samhain, when the barriers broke down between the world of the living and the dead, he would go to the Irish capital of Tara, play some music that makes everybody go to sleep, and burn all the treasures of the village. As this went on for 23 years, the king finally asked for men to stop it, to take on Alan. Finn volunteered, and on his way to Tara, with Samhain, he obtained a special spear called the Burga. This spear warded against the sleep-inducing music, and it said that the ward worked if you simply let the blade touch your flesh. But in other accounts, it says that Finn, every time he nearly fell asleep, cut himself to stay awake. Eventually the beast arrived at Tara, and Finn, still being awake, slayed him quite easily. But even in the Ulster cycle, Samhain takes a very important place. At the time of Cuchulainn and the great cattle raid at Cooley, the young hero Cuchulainn defends Ulster on his own, with the rest of the Ulster men cursed They couldn't fight. And Samhain was the day that Queen Maeve chose to attack the Ulster men. And Samhain is also supposed to be the time when Lugh of the Tuatha Dé Danann, Cuchulain's father, appeared out of the hills of Tara, watched Cuchulainn take his last breath, and take him from the mortal world to his. But even before that, and we're going back now to the first cycle of Irish history, Samhain is supposed to be the day of the Second Battle of Moytura, the day in which Lugh of the Tuatha Dé Danann killed the Fomorian Balor, his grandfather, and took control of Ireland. All these important mentions in Irish history, right back to the Tuatha Dé Danann, the Fomorians, it tells us one thing, that the ancient Gaels, the original Irish before the Celts, celebrated Samhain, Halloween, long before the Celts. It was these ancient traditions that intertwined themselves with the oncoming Celtic culture, and later on the Christian culture, and later on again modern culture, making Ireland once again a very important place when we speak of the ancient history of the world. That brings us nicely to why Samhain became Halloween. And this is where the Christian influence comes in. In the 8th century, Pope Gregory III founded the Feast of All Saints. And this was on the 1st of November, the time of Samhain. In 835, Pope Gregory IV made this a day of obligation, meaning that all Catholics had to celebrate Mass, unless they had a very good reason not to. But to me, this position in Christianity was forced upon people because at this time, the old Celtic ways, the old Irish ways that had spread over Europe after the fall of the Romans, were still very strong. And the Christian Church really needed to stamp its authority on Europe and Ireland. But this day for the Church is a solemn day, dedicated to all the saints of the Church. And All Souls' Day, on the 2nd of November, is dedicated to those who have died, but have not yet reached heaven. All Saints' Day is also called All Hallows, or All Hallowmas, and the eve of that date is All Hallows' Eve, which over time became Halloween, which has become the celebrations that we've come to know so well. And it is very interesting that the Church took that position to have their All Souls' Day for their saints and people. Around the time the ancients of Ireland celebrated the merging of the land of the living and the land of the dead. Tourism Ireland do have a campaign out at the minute, Ireland, the home of Halloween. And that's true. Well, tonight might have seemed like a wee bit of a lecture, but I think it's important to hear these sort of stories because we don't hear them all the time. We don't hear the meaning behind the festivals or events anymore. Information throughout us on the internet is coming so fast and there's so much of it. And it's nice at times just to sit back, relax, and hear something new. Or hear a little bit more about something. Tomorrow I'm going to attempt to come live from Big Moorstone Circles. Now there could be a bit of an issue up there with the 4G because you're up in the sticks. And there's definitely no 5G down there. But I've had a couple of test runs and hopefully it works. But if it doesn't, I'm giving you my apologies now. But the stone circles are a perfect place to be on Halloween night. Now this year we have a blue moon. That means that we've had 2 full moons inside 1 month. Your once in a blue moon event. But with this, and the stone circles, the portals from the land of the dead to the land of the living, with a blue moon, it should make for an interesting night. As always, stay safe, and let's hope that this once in a blue moon event at Halloween isn't the end of the world as we know it, because given the year that we've had in 2020, it wouldn't surprise me. All these videos were made in conjunction with a crowdfunding campaign I'm running for Embrace the Dark to develop these stories into experiences and tours for you. And before I go, I'll have to say, happy birthday, Ruby. Or I could end up in the tomb somewhere.
Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. I am 1,000 winds that blow. I am the diamond glint on snow. I am the sunlight on ripened grain. I am the gentle autumn rain. And when you wake in the morning hush, I am the swift uplifting rush of quiet birds in circling flight. I am the soft starlight at night. Do not stand at my grave and weep. I am not there. I do not sleep. Do not stand at my grave and cry. I am not there. I did not die.